Imagine standing at the edge of a vast desert, feeling the heat rising from the cracked earth beneath your feet. Or picture yourself in the middle of a thick, wet forest, where the only sound is the rustle of leaves above and the calls of birds. In another moment, you're standing on a grassy plain, surrounded by towering bison herds. These are the environments that shaped the lives of Native American tribes, and they still tell stories of ingenuity, resilience, and deep spiritual connections to the land. Native Americans lived across the entire continent, each tribe adapting to its specific environment. They didn't just survive, they thrived in some of the harshest and most diverse conditions imaginable. From the arid deserts of the Southwest to the lush forests of the Pacific Northwest, their cultures flourished because of their deep understanding of nature and their ability to work in harmony with it. In this video, we're going to journey through time and space, exploring where Native Americans lived and how they sustained themselves through food, community, and a deep respect for nature. We'll learn about their farming techniques, hunting practices, and food preservation methods. Everything they did was a testament to their resourcefulness and their respect for the environment. We'll also uncover some incredible stories about Native American wisdom, traditions, and survival strategies that help them navigate the challenges of their environments. These stories aren't just pieces of history. They offer valuable lessons that can still be applied to modern-day issues like sustainability, community building, and resource management. Let's start with the regions of North America, beginning with the Southwest, where life was often a battle against the harsh desert. The Southwest is a land of extremes. Imagine wide-open spaces, a sun that beats down relentlessly, and the dry winds that sweep across the desert. The landscapes here are full of dramatic contrasts: rocky highlands, dry, cracked earth, and canyons carved by ancient rivers. Water is scarce, and temperatures can soar above 100 degrees during the day and plummet to freezing at night. But despite these challenges, the Native American tribes of the Southwest, such as the Pueblo, Hopi, and Navajo, found ways not just to survive, but to thrive. The Southwest is home to some of the most extreme weather conditions on Earth. Long stretches of desert dominate the landscape, with very little rainfall. The ground is hard and dry, and the soil often lacks the nutrients needed to grow crops. Farming in such an environment seems nearly impossible, yet the tribes here were masters of adaptation. In addition to droughts, extreme temperatures, and poor soil, another challenge was the lack of large, easily accessible game. Hunting was difficult because animals were scarce, and most of the land was inhospitable for farming. This forced the people of the Southwest to develop incredibly efficient and sustainable systems of agriculture, relying on water conservation techniques and a deep knowledge of the land's rhythms. Native American tribes in the Southwest, like the Pueblo and Hopi, created innovative solutions to these challenges. One of the most notable adaptations was the development of complex irrigation systems. By building canals and dams, the Pueblo people were able to divert water from rivers to their fields. This enabled them to grow crops in areas that would otherwise be too dry for farming. These water systems required knowledge of the landscape and great care to maintain, as water had to be carefully managed to ensure the crops received the right amount of hydration. One of the most important crops in the Southwest was corn. Known as one of the Three Sisters, corn was often planted alongside beans and squash. These three crops were not just a food source, they were the foundation of Southwestern agriculture. Corn provided carbohydrates, beans offered protein, and squash provided vital vitamins and minerals. Together, these crops formed a balanced diet that sustained entire communities. But it wasn't just about the crops. Dry farming techniques helped to make the most of the limited water available. The Hopi, for example, would plant their seeds deep into the soil, where moisture was more abundant. They also planted crops in areas where natural depressions collected rainwater, further conserving this precious resource. Food preservation was another critical component of survival in the desert. Corn, beans, and squash were dried to preserve them for the long, dry months. This method allowed tribes to store large quantities of food, which was essential when resources were scarce. Meat was another important part of the diet. Tribes like the Navajo and Pueblo hunted deer, rabbits, and other small game. However, because hunting was often unreliable, the meat was preserved through smoking or jerky making. This allowed them to store the meat for longer periods, especially when food was scarce. The Hopi dry farming tradition, one story that has been passed down among the Hopi people, is the tale of how they learned to read the land and listen to the earth itself. Hopi elders would often say that they could hear the earth telling them where to plant their crops. By paying close attention to the subtle signs of the land like the color of the soil or the direction of the wind, they could find places to plant seeds even in the barren desert. This deep connection to the land allowed them to grow food where others might have thought it impossible. The Hopi and other southwestern tribes taught us the value of listening to the earth and using every tool at our disposal to adapt to our surroundings. Their innovations in irrigation and dry farming allowed them to turn the harsh desert into a thriving home for their people. The Great Plains stretch across the center of North America, a vast expanse of grasslands that stretches from Canada all the way down into Mexico. The landscape is both open and vast, with few natural barriers, just rolling hills and endless plains. The weather here is extreme, with frigid winters and scorching summers. The region was home to many nomadic tribes, such as the Sioux, Cheyenne, and Blackfoot. In this vast land, survival depended heavily on one key resource, the American bison. For the Plains tribes, the land provided little in the way of fertile soil for farming, and with the extreme temperatures, growing crops was not a viable option. The Great Plains are characterized by their open space and abundant grasslands, but they also present challenges. In the summer, intense heat and drought often made water sources scarce. In the winter, the brutal cold could freeze rivers and make survival even harder. Yet, these vast grasslands were home to one of the most essential animals to the Native American people, the bison. The bison roamed the plains in massive herds, and the tribes who lived there learned how to use every part of the animal to survive. The American bison, also known as the buffalo, was the cornerstone of life for the Plains tribes. Almost every part of the bison was used for food, tools, clothing, and shelter. These tribes were experts at hunting and tracking, with many different methods used to catch the animals. Food: the bison provided an abundant source of meat. Bison was not just eaten fresh. It was also dried and preserved to last through harsh winters. The most popular form of preservation was pemmican, a mixture of dried bison meat, fat, and berries. This was a high-energy food that could be stored for months, providing nourishment during the long winter months when fresh food was scarce. Shelter: the bison's hides were used to create tipis, the portable homes of the Plains tribes. These structures were lightweight, durable, and could be quickly assembled or dismantled, making them ideal for the nomadic lifestyle of following the bison herds. Tools and clothing: bison bones, horns, and sinew were crafted into tools, weapons, and clothing. Every part of the animal was used, and nothing went to waste. The skin was turned into blankets, clothing, and even bags. The bones were made into knives and scrapers, and the sinew was used for sewing and string. The winter hunt: one of the most important traditions in the Plains tribes was the winter bison hunt. In the depths of winter, when food was hardest to come by, young warriors would participate in the hunt to provide for their people. One story passed down from the Cheyenne people tells of a young boy who joined his first hunt. He was nervous but eager to prove himself. The tribe worked together, using their deep knowledge of the land and the bison's behavior to herd the animals into a buffalo jump, a natural cliff where the bison would fall to their deaths. This hunt was not only about providing food, but also about teaching the younger generation the importance of unity and respect for the animals that sustain them. By following the bison, the Plains tribes turned a harsh environment into a thriving community. They showed the world that survival was not just about endurance, but about understanding the land, its rhythms, and the creatures that lived upon it. The southeastern United States is a land of contrasts. The region is rich in fertile soil, warm temperatures, and abundant rainfall. It is here that tribes like the Cherokee, Creek, and Seminole made their homes. The land provided them with everything they needed to survive except for one thing: flooding. The region's rivers often overflowed and diseases like malaria were common. But despite these challenges, the southeastern tribes thrived. In the southeast, the land was fertile, and the growing season was long. Rivers, lakes, and forests offered abundant resources, from fish to game and plant life. However, flooding was a constant problem. Every year, the rivers would overflow, submerging fields and causing great loss of crops. On top of that, the humidity and warm temperatures created a breeding ground for diseases like malaria, which made survival difficult at times. Despite these challenges, the southeastern tribes were able to create flourishing agricultural societies. The southeast's abundant resources meant that the people here had a varied and diverse diet. Corn, beans, and squash, the three sisters, were staple foods for the southeast tribes, just as they were for those in the southwest. But here, the crops were often grown in fertile river valleys, where irrigation from the river helped maintain a steady water supply. Corn was a central part of life in the southeast. It was prepared in many forms, such as hominy, cornbread, and dumplings. It was dried and stored for long-term use, providing essential sustenance during the lean months. Meat and fish. The southeastern tribes relied on deer, turkey, and fish for meat. These were smoked or dried to preserve them, and the abundance of fish provided a valuable protein source. Fruits and nuts. The southeast's forests were rich in wild berries, hickory nuts, and persimmons. These foods were gathered in season and stored for the winter months. The Cherokee's Corn Festival. Each year, the Cherokee people held the Green Corn Ceremony, a festival that celebrated the first corn harvest of the season. It was a time of thanksgiving and renewal. During this festival, people would dance, feast, and perform rituals to honor the corn and other foods that sustain them. The Green Corn Ceremony also offered a chance for people to forgive one another, heal old wounds, and strengthen community bonds. The southeastern tribes knew that abundance was not just a gift from the earth, it was something to be celebrated and shared. Their ceremonies were deeply tied to the land and to the crops they grew, reinforcing the community's connection to nature and each other. The Northeast is a region known for its dense forests and long, bitter winters. Tribes like the Iroquois, Algonquin, and Wampanoag made their homes in this land of extremes. The winter months were particularly harsh, and the snow-covered landscape made hunting and gathering difficult. But the people of the Northeast were well prepared for these challenges, relying on careful planning and resourcefulness to survive. The Northeast is known for its dense forests and cold winters. The snow can pile up for months, and the temperatures often dip well below freezing. The growing season is short, so the tribes here had to be resourceful, relying on food preservation and smart planning to survive the long winter months. The Iroquois and Algonquin people learned to work together, relying on each other's skills and knowledge to ensure their survival. They had to be innovative, using the resources available to them wisely and efficiently. Northeastern tribes were masters of food preservation. They dried and smoked meat, especially deer and elk, to ensure they had enough food throughout the cold months. Fish were also smoked and preserved for the winter. This careful preparation meant that even in the coldest months, the people could rely on their stored food. The three sisters, much like the tribes of the Southwest and Southeast, the Iroquois and Algonquin grew corn, beans, and squash. These crops were harvested in the summer and dried to provide food during the winter months. Wild resources. In addition to their crops, the people of the Northeast gathered wild berries, maple syrup, and nuts. The Iroquois were especially known for their maple syrup, a sweet treat that was often used in cooking or enjoyed on its own. The maple syrup harvest. One of the most treasured traditions of the Iroquois was the harvesting of maple syrup. The legend goes that a chief, while out hunting, discovered the sap from a maple tree dripping into a cooking pot. Intrigued, the tribe began to collect this sap and boil it down into syrup. Maple syrup became a valuable sweetener and symbol of the land's generosity. It was celebrated in ceremonies and shared with the community. The people of the Northeast showed us the importance of planning for the future and preserving resources for the times when food is scarce. Their ability to turn simple resources like maple sap into a precious commodity is a testament to their ingenuity and resilience. The Pacific Northwest is a region defined by its lush forests, abundant rivers, and cool coastal climate. The tribes of this area, including the Tlingit, Chinook, and Haida, lived in an environment that was both challenging and bountiful. The challenge was in dealing with the constant rains and floods, but the land was rich in resources that provided everything they needed to thrive. The Pacific Northwest is known for its rainy climate and dense, temperate forests. The abundance of fish, especially salmon, made the region one of the richest in terms of food availability. The region's rivers, coastal waters, and forests were abundant, but the constant rain created a damp and difficult environment. This constant moisture affected daily life, as building structures had to withstand the humidity and rain. The people of the Pacific Northwest had access to a wide variety of foods, thanks to the region's natural resources. The abundance of fish, especially salmon, was central to their diet. Fish were caught using elaborate nets and traps, then smoked or dried for long-term storage. Salmon was a staple, and the people of the Pacific Northwest celebrated its arrival in the rivers each spring. The fish were caught in great numbers, smoked, and stored for the winter months. Seafood: the ocean was rich with food, and many tribes harvested shellfish, such as clams and oysters, and hunted sea otters and whales. Berries and plant life: the forests provided an abundant supply of berries, such as blueberries, salmonberries, and blackberries. These were gathered in the summer and dried for winter use. The salmon run each year. When the salmon ran up the rivers, the tribes celebrated with a salmon feast. One popular legend tells of a fisherman who caught a fish that was larger than any he had ever seen. After it was caught, he honored the fish by singing to it and releasing it back into the river, ensuring the salmon would continue to return each year. The salmon feast became a central part of the community's life, symbolizing gratitude for the river's abundance. The people of the Pacific Northwest showed us the importance of living in harmony with the environment. By understanding the rhythms of the seasons and the habits of the animals and plants around them, they were able to thrive in a land that demanded respect and reverence. The Arctic North, where the harshness of the cold meets the vast expanse of snow and ice, is home to the Inuit and other Arctic tribes. These peoples, living in the regions of Alaska, Canada, and Greenland, faced extreme conditions that required exceptional survival strategies. The region is unforgiving, with temperatures that can dip well below freezing for months on end. The Arctic is one of the most extreme environments on Earth. The region experiences long, dark winters and very short summers. The land is covered in snow and ice for most of the year, and food resources are scarce. The seas provide some food, but much of it is hidden under thick layers of ice, making hunting a difficult endeavor. For the Inuit and other Arctic tribes, survival depended on their ability to adapt to the cold and their profound knowledge of the land, ice, and sea. They developed unique tools and hunting strategies to ensure their survival in these harsh conditions. The Inuit people, for example, became master hunters and fishers, relying on the land and sea to provide for them. Their diet was rich in seal, whale, caribou, and fish, all animals that had adapted to the frigid climate. Seal hunting: the Inuit were experts at hunting seals, which provided them not only with food, but also with skins for clothing and blubber for fuel. They used kayaks and umiaks, larger open boats, to hunt and travel across the icy waters. Whale hunting: whales, especially bowhead whales, were another essential part of the Arctic diet. These massive creatures were hunted using harpoons and other sophisticated tools. The whale meat and blubber provided important nutrition and warmth. Fish and caribou: fish, such as salmon and whitefish, were caught through ice fishing holes. The Arctic tribes also hunted caribou, which provided meat, fur, and bones for tools. The midnight hunt: in one story from the Inuit tradition, a young hunter named Kaluniat goes on his first solo hunt at the height of winter. Under the pale glow of the northern lights, he tracks a seal across the ice. He faces both physical and spiritual trials, encountering strange visions that test his courage. The hunt becomes a spiritual journey, where he not only learns survival skills, but also connects with the spirits of the animals he hunts. His success brings him honor in his community, and the story of his courage is passed down through generations. The Inuits' ability to live in one of the harshest environments on Earth is a testament to their ingenuity and respect for the natural world. Their survival depended on a deep understanding of the animals and the seasons, and they used every part of what they hunted, making sure nothing went to waste. In the arid deserts of the Southwest, the Navajo, Hopi, Zuni, and other tribes lived in a region where water was scarce, and the land was often dry and unforgiving. The desert, though harsh, was also full of life if one knew how to live with it. The southwestern deserts, with their red rock canyons and arid plains, posed unique challenges to those who lived there. The heat was oppressive, and rainfall was infrequent. The people of the Southwest learned to adapt to this environment by becoming expert farmers, hunters, and traders, creating sophisticated ways to capture water and conserve it. The tribes in this region developed advanced irrigation systems to grow crops in the desert, and they utilized the land's unique resources for everything from building materials to food. Corn and other crops. The Southwest tribes grew corn, beans, squash, and cotton. These crops were often grown using irrigation systems that funneled water from rivers like the Colorado and Rio Grande. This water was stored in reservoirs and allowed them to grow crops even during dry seasons. Meat and hunting. Hunting in the desert was difficult due to the harsh environment, but the deer, antelope, and rabbits of the desert provided valuable meat. The buffalo was also important in some areas of the Southwest, though not as prominent as in the Great Plains. Fishing was also a valuable resource in the desert's rivers and streams. Prickly pear and other plants. The Southwest is home to plants like prickly pear cactus and agave, which provided important food sources and materials. The prickly pear cactus was particularly valuable for its edible fruit and pads, which could be eaten raw or cooked. Agave was used to make syrup and fibers, which were woven into mats and baskets. The rain dance of the Hopi, a beautiful story from the Hopi people, speaks of the Kashina spirits, who bring rain to the desert. The Hopi would perform intricate dances to summon the rain, believing that these spirits would bless the land with water. In one tale, a young boy, despite the worst drought in living memory, leads his people in the sacred rain dance. After days of dancing and singing, the clouds finally gather, and rain falls, rejuvenating the land. The story highlights the Hopi's deep connection to the natural world and their reliance on the balance between the spiritual and the earthly. The people of the Southwest demonstrated incredible resilience and ingenuity in adapting to one of the harshest climates on Earth. Their sophisticated irrigation systems, knowledge of desert plants, and close relationship with the environment allowed them to thrive in the face of adversity. The Pacific coast of North America, home to the Nootka, Chinook, Tlingit, and other tribes, offered a very different environment compared to the dry deserts or icy Arctic regions. Here, the land was lush, and the waters teemed with life, from fish to sea mammals to shellfish. The abundant resources of the Pacific coast allowed the tribes to develop unique ways of life that revolved around the sea. The Pacific coast is known for its temperate climate and dense forests. The sea, which is often calm and rich in resources, provided a reliable source of food. The forests were full of resources, from cedar trees that could be carved into canoes to berries and other plants that could be harvested for food. Despite the abundance of resources, the tribes here had to deal with the challenges of living in a coastal environment, including dealing with the sometimes violent storms and the unpredictable tides. Fishing. The tribes of the Pacific coast relied heavily on salmon, which ran up the rivers every year. They used weirs and netting to catch the salmon, and once caught, the fish were smoked or dried to preserve them for the winter. Whale and sea mammals. Whales, sea otters, and seals were another important food source for the Pacific Coast tribes. They hunted these animals using sophisticated tools like harpoons made of bone and stone. Shellfish and sea plants. The shores of the Pacific were rich in clams, oysters, and seaweed, all of which were valuable for nutrition. The seaweed, in particular, was dried and used in soups or as a flavoring for other dishes. The salmon feast, one of the most celebrated events in the Pacific Coast tribes, was the annual salmon feast, where the community came together to honor the first salmon of the season. The fish were caught in great numbers and then cooked in large communal feasts. One particular story tells of a young boy who, while fishing, caught the first salmon of the season. In honor of the fish's spirit, he carefully performed a ceremony before sharing it with the tribe. This moment became a cherished part of the tribe's annual traditions, symbolizing the return of abundance to the land. The people of the Pacific Coast show us how to live in harmony with nature, understanding the cycles of the animals and plants they relied on. They recognized the importance of honoring the creatures that provided them with sustenance, and their ceremonies reflected this deep connection. The woodland regions of North America, home to the Algonquin, Iroquois, and Wampanoag, were rich in forested land, rivers, and lakes. These tribes enjoyed the bounty of both the land and water, and they developed sophisticated hunting and fishing techniques to ensure their survival in the ever-changing seasons. The woodlands were known for their dense forests and numerous waterways, making it an excellent environment for hunting and fishing. However, it was also a region that saw harsh winters, which required careful food storage and preparation. The balance of hunting, fishing, and farming allowed these tribes to thrive, even in the face of seasonal challenges. Fishing was a central activity for the woodlands tribes, especially in the warmer months. They used nets, spears, and traps to catch fish like sturgeon and salmon from the rivers and lakes. Fish were smoked or dried for preservation. Hunting, the forests were full of game such as deer, moose, bears, and wild turkeys. The tribes here developed hunting techniques using bows and arrows, and sometimes traps to catch large game. Crops, the Three Sisters corn, beans, and squash were staples of the woodland diet. These crops were grown together in a sustainable agricultural system that benefited the soil and each plant. The Iroquois Confederacy, a central story of the Iroquois people, is the creation of the Iroquois Confederacy, a political union formed to ensure peace and cooperation among the tribes. According to the legend, a leader named Deganawida the Great Peacemaker united the warring tribes through a series of speeches, ceremonial acts, and promises of mutual aid. This union was not just about survival, but also about mutual respect for the land and the animals they depended on. The people of the woodlands showed us the importance of cooperation not just between tribes, but also with the land and the animals that sustain them. Their farming systems were innovative, and their commitment to peace and mutual aid allowed them to thrive in a sometimes difficult environment. The Great Plains, home to the Sioux, Cheyenne, Comanche, and Blackfoot, was a land of wide open spaces and rolling grasslands. This region, known for its vast herds of buffalo, shaped the lifestyle and culture of the tribes that lived there. The Great Plains was vast, and its abundance of buffalo provided the tribes with most of their sustenance. The challenge, however, was that the environment was not always conducive to farming, and food had to be hunted. The Plains tribes were nomadic, following the buffalo herds across the landscape, setting up temporary camps along the way. Buffalo hunting, the buffalo was central to the life of the Plains tribes. Buffalo meat was eaten fresh, dried, or smoked. The hides were used for clothing, shelter, and tools, while the bones were carved into weapons. Nomadic life, the nomadic lifestyle of the Plains tribes was shaped around the buffalo. They lived in tipis, which could be easily assembled and taken down as they moved from place to place following the herds. Example story. The buffalo dance, one of the most sacred rituals for the Plains tribes, was the buffalo dance, performed to honor the buffalo and to ensure a successful hunt. The dance was a spiritual expression of gratitude and respect for the buffalo, and it was believed that through this ritual, the tribe could connect with the spirit of the buffalo. In one story, a young warrior, after a long hunt, dances alone under the night sky, asking for the buffalo to return. As dawn breaks, the herds arrive, and the tribe celebrates. The Plains tribes demonstrate the importance of the buffalo in both spiritual and practical terms. They show how the land and animals provide not only food and shelter, but also a connection to the spiritual world.